When you're making quick drawing, one of the things to think about is you have to really concentrate on the negative space of the figure. You have to think really quickly about the relationships of each part to the whole. So you can't approach the drawing in the same kind of way that you would approach a partial peak drawing, although really looking at the idea of the figure as a series of interconnected shapes is important. But you have to move between one feature and another, trying to see the interconnection of all the parts, but also again really focusing on that idea of what's the external shape that the figure makes. To a certain extent, there are certain elements that you need to consider, and one of those is certainly the material or the media that you draw with. Some media will force you to draw more slowly than others. Size of drawing can also make a big impact. This drawing is only about 15 centimeters high. When you start to reflect a little bit on the material or the media that you use, then a pointed implement like a pen will force you to draw more slowly than a more gestural medium like charcoal or a brush. So another trick can be to reduce the size of your drawing. If you make the drawing smaller, then physically you're travelling less distance, and subsequently you'll get more of the figure drawn in the same length of time. Your aspiration really, if you can practice this skill, is to get most of the figure done. So in a minute pose, if you've got the majority of the figure executed in 30 seconds, then you can work back into your drawing and you can refine elements of the drawing. You can add detail if you can see it. If you combine what we've learnt from gesture drawing and think about how you might be able to summarise the whole figure in a maximum number of 5 brush marks, then in a few seconds you've captured the essence of the figure. You can then start to work into that drawing. So obviously something like charcoal won't draw in a wet area, but compressed charcoal will draw into a wash. And that can help you capture the real spirit and the energy of the pose. And that's what you're really after in these 1 minute drawings, capturing something of the dynamism of the figure. So you're trying to think with the brush drawing through the figure rather than around the figure. What's the main movement of one limb against another, against another, against another, against another? So it's a very, very quick set of decisions. Then when you're drawing into the drawing, you're not trying to redraw what you've already drawn, but you're trying to add and clarify information about the figure. So this is where you might differentiate between one limb and another. You might clarify the position of the hand, how the shoulder and the head work in relationship to the other arm. You might clarify the nature of the back, and if you've got time you might then work back into the drawing to clarify some of the tonal information. Sometimes trying to see the figure really simply, first of all, as a series of main directions, not that dissimilar to a stick figure, can be advantageous. You can then start to see within the figure those different changes of direction. And again, you can start to clarify and refine aspects of the drawing. Again, scale really helps capture a great deal in a short space of time. So the smaller the drawing, the more you can achieve in the time. When you have a 2-minute pose, it's advantageous to approach the drawing in the same way as before, trying to capture the essence of the main directions of the body. But within 2 minutes you can also consider other elements. For instance, here I'm using a marker pen, but I'm also starting to think more about where I'm seeing tone. So my gesture may be describing tone as well as the direction of a limb. I can really pay attention to the negative space. And I might contradict the original drawing, but the drawing originally adds something of an understanding of how the figure works. Practicing in terms of drawing people on the move, bus stops, train stations, etc. is a really good way of refining your ability to render the figure really quickly. I've still got some time left, so I might then start to add another nuance to the drawing, or indeed I might start to add another medium. In a way, your eye is skimming really quickly across the figure, and as you skim across you can begin to make decisions about what you're seeing, what you're noticing, what are those main directions, what are those main forces. Once you've established that, then that clarification element. Again, really focusing on the space between each of the limbs. The negative space in these drawings is really important, particularly to understand the vitality, the direction and dynamism of the figure. It's also important to think about media. So sometimes you find that if you are working with a fine line pen, it slows you down. So sometimes just changing up to something which has a more gestural quality to it can really help, enabling you to sort of better time manage. There's a kind of tension that's created through short poses that I think is worth kind of exploiting in the drawing. Obviously, the quicker you can get tone down, the better, the more efficient your drawing becomes. When one is working with charcoal, again you can start to see the figure really broadly. You can think about those main directions, those negative spaces. Trying to see as quickly as possible the essence of the figure. So in a sense, my strategy for making a drawing like this is think about the main directions of the figure first. Once you've established those, then think about the tone. So the lights and the darks. Then finally, you've got the opportunity within 2 minutes to begin to refine and develop. more of the information from the figure. Always looking, always drawing. The less time you have, the more it should be spent looking at the model than at your drawing paper.